All right, we're going to turn a bowl tonight. First thing you want to do is select your wood. And of course, most of you already know, you cut a tree down, you don't just cut a slice out of there and use that for a bowl, because you got the pith in the middle of the tree, and that's going to crack because your wood's going to shrink more on the outside than it does on the inside. And I've got a piece to demonstrate that. Pass that around, if you don't mind. That piece has got the pith in it, and that's already cracked. A lot of times it won't crack until after you make your bowl, crack will show up. Like everything else, some wood's not going to crack, but most wood will. That's just white ash, and it's got a real soft pith in it, so it's more prone to crack than some woods are. So, give a piece. On this one, you can't see very well. The rings of the tree goes like this, so this would be the heart of the tree on this side. So I'm going to make that the center or the bottom of my bowl. And I'm wrong, right there's the bottom. That will be the bottom. Once you've selected your wood, you got to find the center of this thing. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to find the center of something round. This is one of the plastic center finders. You have a 90-degree square on this side and about 60-degree on this side. And 60-degree is supposed to be for finding center. You go like that, go to the opposite side, come over here, hit this side, do all four sides, and that should give you the center.
Show it to the camera.
Hold it up, we couldn't see.
Here, right here.
Oh, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that mark or not. There's a little wax on there.
No.
It's showing up real good.
Not
I'm
really.
gonna mark it again. I like to use dividers. You know why they call them dividers, don't you? Because you can divide anything with them. I take this, and that's pretty close. Make a mark. Come to this side, make an arc. Back to this side. That's going to be hard to see because there's wax on that. You might be able to see it. Can you see it? Okay. This is just a center punch. You can use anything. You can use a pointed awl, anything to make a divot in there. Now, if you're going to mount this, if you've got a four-jawed chuck, usually they come with a worm. If you don't have that, if you want, you can use just a regular faceplate. Since this is going to be the top, we're going to be cutting that out later. You can just screw this right in to the top, mount that on there, and turn it that way. We're going to use a screw chuck, and I've got this one here. I use it a lot for smaller bowls. If I have a piece of wood that's pretty thin, and I can't really drill very deep into there without, for fear of going through the other side, I'll take this little spacer, put it on my screw chuck, and that'll take up, well, at least a third of the distance of that screw. We use this blank, we don't have to worry about that too much. And I'm going to use this chuck with this worm. First thing you gotta do is figure out how big the worm is. And these cheap little calipers from Harbor Freight, they're digital and they're great. The outside of the threads is .39 or 40. If you go to the inside, it's 27. So I get my drill out. This drill bit is 31, so that should work. That'll give me a. You don't want it so tight that you, especially on if you got a real dry piece of wood, you don't want it so tight you can't get it on there, because then you won't hardly be able to get it back on. The depth of your thread out there, I've got this marked pretty much with that piece of tape. So that tells me about how deep I need to go. And drill press is what I usually use at home. But it's not crucial. Now, let me get this out before I get started.
We left you a lot of room up there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to get my dividers out here, and I'm going to close the jaws on this. On this chuck. I'm going to measure the outside of these jaws. Can you see what I'm doing? You see that? All right. That gives me a pretty good measurement of what size my recess is going to be. That's how I'm going to do this bowl, is with a recess. This worm's got a couple flat spots on it, and it goes in between your chuck jaws, and this groove in here goes, the bottom of your chuck jaws fits right in that groove. And there's a couple little flat spots that'll line up with your chuck jaws. What I usually do is wiggle a little bit, and I know that's tight. And all your professional turners always go to the second one and just to make sure it's tight, I guess. I don't know why they do it. But since they do it, I do it too. Now that should be deep enough, and I can just screw this on here. That's going on pretty good. But you want to be on real tight. So we just keep turning it. Trick is not to strip it out. Well, that doesn't turn very fast, does it?
No.
All right. This is a nice tailstock called a live center because it spins. And on these, I like them because you can take this off. This cone-shaped center off. Set it aside, and then you've got a live center on the inside with this cup ring. Keeps the point from going in too deep. That's the only difference. Always bring your tailstock up whenever possible. Put pressure on that. Now that can't go anywhere. That's trapped in between the screw and that. So even if I get a catch or something, this is not going to come off here. So you're all safe right now. Now I like to keep my, well, this is backwards from mine. I like to keep my tool rest close to center ways, maybe just a little bit above center out here. Always turn it by hand, make sure it's turning freely, you're not hitting anything. And then take your tool. This is just a 1/2-inch bowl gouge. And I'm gonna start by just smoothing this off because it's way out of round, as you can see. How overrun that is. I'm gonna smooth that up. When it's spinning like that, it's hard to tell when it's round. So instead of sticking your hand up there and knocking the end of your finger off, hear that tapping there a little bit? Well, that tells you there's a flat spot right there. You can keep your finger safe. I could go on out there and fray that up a little bit, and at this point it really doesn't matter, but just kind of out of habit, always come back in from the opposite direction, just to smooth that off. So that's nice and round that way. Now, since this is going to be the bottom of my bowl, and there's a pretty good crack in there too. So this is going to be the bottom of my bowl, so I'm going to turn it this way. Let's see if I've got. So I'll be turning the bowl to go like this. So I always turn my tool rest pretty much in the direction that I'm going to be cutting. And when I'm cutting like this, the wood grain is going this way on the bowl. So while I'm cutting back this way, I want to cut like this. Be cutting with the grain. I don't want to cut this way because I'll be cutting into the grain. You understand? Is that clear? I'll do it both ways, but just to show you, you get a lot better cut. You're cutting this way, cutting with the grain. That even sounds a little harder. If you look at the cut, it's got a little more tear out on it that way. Even though my tool's pretty sharp, when you're cutting into the grain, it's a lot harder on the wood. It's a lot harder to make the cut. Try to keep your tool rest up within 1/4 to 1/2 inch. You don't want to be reaching out very far, and you don't have as good control over your tool. Now that's kind of roughed out. What I need to do now is flatten this bottom out. I'll move this back. And whenever you move that back, you want to take that out of there.
Put holes in your arms.
Because that's probably the most dangerous tool you have in your hole and all your gouges and everything out here. That probably draws more blood than any other tool in woodturning. Alright, I'm going to stick this just below center. And since this is pretty flat here, I'm just gonna go straight across, flatten the bottom of this off. That's not too bad. That's fairly flat. I can't see my tools, I got too many shavings over here. All right, now, I'll take these dividers, which I measured the jaws of my chuck on here, and I'm gonna lay them on here, and as the lathe is turning, I'm gonna stick this point into the wood. If I stick both of them into the wood, it's gonna bring this over, it's gonna smack my finger. So I just want one corner into the wood. Make a scratch, and then bring this up. That's way too small. So bring it out a little farther. That's still a little small. Bring it out even farther. That's it, right on the money. So that's marked. I know where I need to cut. Can you see it? Does that help any? Mm-hmm. All right, now, if I had a parting tool, I had one at one time, there we go. We're gonna make a part. I don't know. Should say, I should have mentioned earlier, there's two different ways of doing this. I'm going to do a recess in here because your jaws can expand or contract. So I'm going to put the jaws inside here and expand it. You can do it the other way and leave a tendon on there and contract onto it. The only problem with doing it this way is that when you finish, you're going to have to turn your bowl around and cut that off. But a lot of times when I have a green piece of wood, something I'm going to cut real thick, put it in a bag and let dry for 6 months, I'll put a tendon on here because when it dries and warped, that's a little bit easier to get a hold of than if I do a recess. Because it dries, it'll change the shape of the recess a little bit. Pass that around, please. But we're going to do a recess in here, so let me get that cleaned out a little bit. I've got the bulk of the wood out. Now, these little easy wood tools are real good for things like getting right in here and getting straight in on this. Help me flatten that out. If you don't have one of them, a skew chisel works real good. And you can use the point to touch a little bit of a dovetail in there because these jaws have a dovetail on them. So on fairly soft wood like that, that's not real important because they'll grab, bite in there pretty good anyhow. Now that I've got this fairly well defined on my recess, I'm going to finish shaping the outside of the bowl. That's not real great, but we'll pretend like it is. Now at this time, normally, I would take some CA glue, I'd fill this crack up. And I'd go ahead and sand it, do all my sanding, finish it up. Put my name in here, because once I take this off here, I'm not going to have to turn it back around, because this will be completely finished. So, I'll pretend like I'm sanding. Okay, half hour later, I'm through sanding. Wish it was that easy at home. But that's one thing, I mean, you can't sand too much, really. And the more you sand, the better product you're gonna turn out. And whatever sandpaper you start with, whether you start with 100 or 120 or 80, whatever, make sure you get every little defect, every little tear out, get it out with that first grit you use. Because, and I've done it myself, I think, well, I've almost got it out. It'll come out with the 120 or 320. It won't. It never will come out. It'll be there forever. You'll never get it out. So get them all out with that coarsest grit. The rest of your grits, all you're doing with the other grits are taking out the scratches from the previous grit. That's all they're to do, just smooth things out. All right, now we're ready to turn this around. And hopefully this will unscrew. No, not going to do it. The whole thing's unscrewed. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. Let's stick this in here. Get my tool rest up there close. And maybe we can do that. There it goes. That sounds simple enough? Anybody have any questions about that?
How deep is your recess?
Huh?
How deep is your recess?
Well, that's a good question. That's a real good question. On this one, it's just less than 1/4 of an inch. But the foot I put on it is only about 1/8 of an inch. So that way I catch hold of more material that way. On the dovetail jaws, you don't have to have as much to grip onto as you do if your jaws are straight. If you have straight jaws, you better go probably 1/4 of an inch. And don't hesitate to ask questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up.
Now, I will tell you on a statement you made that you can't sand too much.
Huh?
On a statement you made that you can't sand too much,
Mm-hmm.
I have sanded a pin down to the tube. So
Yeah,
yes,
well-
you can sand too much.
There's an exception to every rule. Yeah, I went through a bottom of a bowl one time. And this is a real neat trick. I didn't measure that good enough. So we're going to have to go back and enlarge that just a little bit. We'll do this the fast way. All right. Try this one more time. The reason why I'm trying to keep this pretty close to my jaw size, because the farther you have to open your jaws out, the less round they are. So it'll hold better this way. Also, I might add, if you have a wet piece of wood, anybody's worked with wet wood, you put wet wood against steel, it leaves a black mark. So if you don't want that on there, all you have to do is take a piece of that saran wrap or something, put it over your jaws and you're in good shape. Ah, it fits this time. All right. And we'll go to the other one, just for that little extra. Now, if this was a bigger bowl, I would bring my tailstock up, put it in there for that extra support.
Question. You drew the outside up before you start on the inside?
On this one, I probably should because I didn't do a very good job on the outside, but it's running pretty true.
Okay, I just
So I'm not
was
going
asking.
to, yeah. And like I said, if you finish this bottom part, you want to finish the whole side so your finish will be smooth. You won't have it, won't look blotchy. But sometimes you don't have any choice. You have to go back and redo the whole side, or sometimes you let your wood set for a little bit and it'll move. And also, take wood out of the middle, sometimes it'll move, even if you got dry wood. Wood's got a mind of its own. By the time you think you know what wood's going to do, it'll do something totally different. All right. Now you don't have to, but the way I usually do is I true this face off first. It's not too bad. You see it bouncing. No more bounce. That's nice
Why
and
would you
flat.
do that? You're cutting it all away.
Huh?
Why would you do that? You're gonna cut it all away to make a hole.
Well, when I start putting my tool in here, I'm gonna be on a flat surface. If I'm if it's an uneven surface, I'm gonna get that bouncing, and this is an easy way to get rid of that.
Okay, I got it.
And also, a lot of times, especially when you're hogging a lot of wood out real fast, it'll start bouncing on you. What you do is go back, take a real light cut, smooth that out. Bring your tool back. Now I'm cutting on the downside of my tool right here. And as soon as I put that point in there, I've made a ridge for my bevel to ride on. And so I don't have to put a lot of force on there. This is just pushing down on the tool rest. Cut right in there. Now, you can cut on this side, on the top side of your tool just as easily. A lot of people like to cut that way. You do a good cut that way. The problem is, on this long grind, the farther back you go, the more tendency the wood has to pull your tool into the wood. So the more likely you are to have it cut. So for beginning, you want to use the bottom side and up towards the top, probably within a quarter of the middle of the top. You don't have to push hard. If you got a sharp tool, you want to make sure that you're putting pressure down on your tool rest. So that's when you'll get in trouble if it comes up off the tool rest. And I'm cutting from the outside in. So the grains of my wood are going this way. I'm cutting downhill. Sorry. So I've got just a little bevel once I get started on this. tool to work, and I just follow it through. I was making a little noise down there on the bottom because I'm cutting right into end grain that way. Another good way to judge your distance is to drill a hole in here. And you can get your drill put in here. And that'll give you kind of a depth stop so you know how deep to go. That's just like using a drill, except your wood's turning instead of your drill's turning. And it helps it, because the center of this is hard to get out. I don't know why the center is so much harder than the rest of it is. A lot of people take a forstner bit, you know, ½ inch or an inch, and drill that out. Maybe that. Can I move this? I'll make that back just a little bit, we won't have to take it off.
Part of the middle turn slower?
Yeah, turn
Yeah,
things.
I never thought about that.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, it's not turning as much.
Take it there. This helps us. Now I'm getting it, a little bit of it roughed out, I want to make a decision. If this was wet wood and I was going to take and dry it, I'd leave it probably at least 3/4 of an inch or ½ inch for something this size. Something about like that would probably work. Still pretty thick. When that wood dries and warps, then I've still got enough wall thickness to true it back up again 6 months from now. But this is pretty dry, so we'll go ahead and cut it out a little bit better. And I'm using a different grind on this tool, which is easier to get down in the bottom.
Show the camera.
Can you see it? No. You see it here?
Yeah, show it there.
What is the grind?
60 degrees. Used to be, I couldn't have told you that, but now that...
Got it on the side of it.
Yeah. Now that I've got that Wolverine system, you know, and you got the thing that tells you exactly what your angle is. Used to be, I just had one cut at a real slight angle and one at a steeper angle. I didn't know what those degrees was. And it doesn't really matter as long as it works for you.
I call that a swag. Scientific wild ass guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I did that for 25 years. If it works, don't fix it. It ain't broke. I got down to my drill mark. My drill mark was just kind of an eyeball guess. So I want to get a little bit better measurement. And this is a store-bought gauge. It's on here like this, run in there, and that tells you how deep you are. This is a made-at-home gauge, does exactly the same thing. Put that in there like that, hold it up on top, and you can tell pretty much where the bottom of your bowl is. So I'm right about there. I've still got half, 3/4 of an inch to go. Another good measurement thing is this here, which I didn't measure to begin with. I had it set to my other one, that might be all right for this here. This should be right about where my jaws are, where I've got this tape. I set it up at mine at home, and so that tells me that I've got almost 3/4 of an inch there before I go through the bottom. Which I've done that when I'm doing demonstrations before, just to show people what not to do.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I'm sure that makes fun.
So we're in pretty good shape. Let me just do a little touch up on this here. You hear that noise? The noise that it's making, that's the wood flexing a little bit. This kind of soft wood, if I cut it, the thinner I cut it, the more it's going to do that. And you can see a little bit of vibration in there. But that's probably all right for a demonstration.
About what speed are you turning that at?
I don't know. I'm guessing about 1,200. Yeah, 1,300. That's a little faster than I would normally. On my finishing cut, I'd slow it down a little bit. That's okay for roughing out. Of course, when you're sanding, you want to slow it down to about 500. And then this is just a shear scraping. You just take one wing of your gouge.
Show it to the camera. Okay, one wing of the gouge.
One wing of the gouge and lay it up on your bowl. Like if this was that one wing, you don't want both of them touching. You want it to go up at about a 45 degrees on your bowl as your bowl's turning. That's called a shear scraper. If you hold it down to the side like this, that's just a flat scrape. 45 degrees is a shear scrape. And you can see some of the ridges I've got on this. So I can just take a real light cut with that and move a lot of those ridges off there. The more of them I get off, the less sanding I have to do. But this is not a real good piece of wood because it's got a pith in there. This is probably going to crack on me eventually, but for a demonstration, it should be all right. All right, and then now I would sand it and finish it. And anybody else have any other questions?
What do you finish your bowls with most often?
What?
What do you finish your bowls with most often?
Most often. It's a good question. I'm still playing around with finishes. My oldest finish and the one I use most often is shellac. I'll put a coat of shellac on here, wipe it off, soak it in good, wipe it off, heat it up and buff it a little bit. Then, if I'm going to use wipe-on poly or anything, I can go over top of that with polyurethane or lacquer or whatever else I want to do. Most times I'll just put the shellac on and then put an oil on, like Mahoney's walnut oil or Danish oil. Let that set overnight, let that oil polymerize in the wood, and then I'll buff it. One of those pieces I set around was buffed like that. And that's my most common finish. Now on the segmented bowls, I do that, I put the shellac on it, then I go to the wipe-on polyurethane. The reason why the shellac is good is because some oily woods will keep your polyurethane from setting up. If you have, bloodwood or something like that in there, your polyurethane won't set up. So if you seal it with shellac first, then you're okay.
Do you sand your shellac?
Huh?
Do you sand the shellac before you put?
Yeah, I'll usually sand,
And then sand it?
heavy, but lightly. And then I sand between each coat. Depending on my wood, if I have a real porous wood, I'll sand with some heavy sandpaper, maybe 220 between coats until I get those pores filled up, and then I'll go up to 320, 400, or 600, or whatever. And the last coat I put on usually like 800 grit and put my coat on, and I use steel wool a lot to clean that off. But you can just use oil, Danish oil or Mahoney's oil. One thing I did for a long time, I would use mineral oil, and I'd wet my piece down with mineral oil and sand it. Wet sand it with mineral oil on there. Man, it does a really nice finish that way. And that, of course, that's food safe and everything. I've tried probably hundreds of different finishes. Some I liked, but just never went back to, and some I didn't care much for. What was that, Waterlux? Waterlux. I didn't care much for that. It's supposed to be a wonderful finish, and it costs a lot of money, and people swear by it. I didn't care much for it. But, different strokes for different folks.
Tom, a little trick I've been using lately, put the shellac on, let it dry, and then I use a card scraper, the lathe that's turning real slow.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't yuck up your sandpaper nearly as
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Malcolm Tibbetts does that.
That's who I got it from.
Yeah,
Tibbetts.
yeah, he does that a lot, and that's a good trick, especially with segmented wood.
Segmented, you're gonna put poly over.
Yeah, because segmented wood, you got a lot of end grain. On this piece, the wood's going this way. When my tool's cutting here, I'm cutting with the grain. Here, I'm cutting end to end grain. With the grain, end to end grain. On the segmented turning, depending on how many pieces in there, I can be cutting end to end grain 48 times on each revolution. So you get a lot more tear out. So what he's talking about, seal it up real good with shellac. Take a card scraper. Everybody know what that is?
No,
Kevin?
I don't know what a card scraper is.
Well, it's a flat piece of steel, like a flat card with sharp corners on it, like this. And what they do on cabinet scrapings, you bend it a little bit and push it across the wood. On something like this, you would just hold it like this. That's not real sharp. Yeah, that's working there. And you just get real
Thin fuzzy.
You just get little whispers of shavings off there, and that helps smooth your surface out. Then it's like, it's kind of like sanding, only you can take a lot more wood off that way with it.
Card scraper only, or you sand it after?
No, you sand after it.
So that would just keep from getting all the muck in your sand.
Yeah, it takes the surface shellac off, but it goes into the pores and still.
You lightly sand it after.
Yeah, we'll sand it.
Just
Wouldn't
wouldn't.
start it.
On finishes,
220 or
if
something like
you're
that.
gonna use that bowl, you better determine not to use several finishes. That mineral oil will turn rank. You can get food particles or whatever in there, and it'll turn rank, or a lacquer will wear off. So if you're gonna use a bowl, you have to determine what finish you want to put on that thing.
Yeah. Well, they say most finishes, once they've cured out completely, are food safe. I wouldn't trust polyurethane myself, but I guess you could if you want to. I'm not going to try.
Most people are afraid of a finish, they think it'll poison you, but they've determined that it won't.
Yeah, that's what they said. Once it cures,
Any finish is good.
polyurethane might take 7 or 8 weeks for it to totally cure out though. So don't put a coat on today and think you can eat out of it tomorrow. Most oil finishes are safe, and you can use linseed oil. You can use
I like linseed.
flaxseed oil. Anything like that will work.
Any of the fruit oils, nut oils, or
Yeah, any food oils, nut oils, and that. Any more questions about this? I've got one more thing I want to talk about. And that's,
I got a question, I
yeah.
guess it's just a point I sort of have a problem with, not with you by any means. But you call it shear scraping?
shear
You're
scrape.
actually cutting.
It's what?
You call it shear scraping and you're actually cutting, so it's
Yeah.
actually shear cutting.
Yeah, it's shear.
no, no.
No, you're not
It
scraping.
No.
it depends on the
Cutting,
angle of the
you're
bevel.
only cutting when you rub the bevel. If you're not rubbing the bevel, you're scraping.
Yeah.
I don't know who says that, but you're wrong.
Well, it might be just,
But when you get shavings, you're cutting.
it might be the difference of tomato and tomato, just
It
how you
might be,
say it.
it might be.
But
That's just, it's
That's
just
what,
something that's always.
that's what most
sort of
people
bugged me.
call it, and so that's what I call it.
Yeah,
Scraping is when you have your tool
it's when you're.
parallel, and like, well, that's what most people use a skew for, or this is a regular, can't think of it, what do you call it? Negative edge scraper. And that's made to lay flat. If I was going to scrape this bowl, I would lay that on my tool rest flat. If I was going to do a shear scraping, I would turn it up at about 45 degree and go across there. You're still scraping, but
You're at a shear angle.
you're at an angle,
Yeah.
a skewed angle.
Well, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
That's fine, yeah. You say potato, I say potato. It's not a big deal.
No, it's not,
It's the same thing, only using different terminology. I wanted to go over a little bit of turning a bowl from a board. Did I say that right? I always get that backwards. Let me go ahead and pass this around a little bit. Everybody see that? Yeah, this is a mistake, but it was going to be a bowl from a board. I got my walnut piece, should have been over on this side of this piece here when I was turning it. But this was actually two small boards. The best way to cut these is on a saw, like a bandsaw or a jigsaw, where you can set your angle. So what you do is you take your board, and this, like I said, this was two boards, and I draw my circle on it, and then I can take each half and cut them. Cut half rings, and then glue the rings together. That's how you get two different colors. And pass that around, let everybody look at that. But what you do is you take a board and cut it at like a 30-degree angle or so.
Show the camera.
Somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees, depending on the thickness. The thicker your pieces are, the steeper your angle needs to be. This is one that I cut at about 45 degrees, and it's not very accurate. Like most, that's why I had a little problem. I could make a bowl out of this because of the inside of it. And you see the inside lines up fairly well. But the outside is way off. So I'm gonna waste a lot of wood there on that one. And this one was cut at about 15 degrees, and it's just the other way. It's a little bit too thin. See that? But I can make a bowl out of that too, but it'll just be thin. Yeah, that's the way that was made. And I've got another one somewhere. Well, here's a couple more. These are all made the same way. This one I had multiple pieces to work with. So, like here I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my maximum diameter rings on this one. What this was, I laminated up a piece of wood. Yellow heart, purple heart, yellow heart, purple heart, all the way across. And I cut it to about 3/8 of an inch thick. They come out with a board about 3.5 inches wide, which is as wide as this is. And I cut the rings like this. Although I had a long board, I had multiple rings. So I could cut a big ring out of this one, and then take the middle of it and make this ring down here. And do the same thing with that one, make the next ring there. And so I had multiple rings where I could build this up and pass that around. And this is the same, basically the same thing, only I had a board with different colored laminations, and I cut the rings on it, and then I turned each layer just like 1/4 of an inch or so, and it makes a little swirl pattern.
Is that kind of how you did the one back there?
That's how I did the ones back there. Now the one that looks like stair steps, that's segmented, but it's the same way. I just did one flat segmented ring, 24 pieces in a ring, where the segments go all the way almost to the middle. Then I cut the rings out of it, and then stacked them up and turned them.
So how did you hollow out this?
Well, I did most of the hollowing before I put the top 2 rings on. And then I didn't have to sand it because you can't get your finger inside.
It's smooth on the inside, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pass them around, see if I can get an idea.
I believe it's called in paper. Making one bowl, sailor bowl. I think 220? Did 220?
Yeah.
I will have the 220 out, but I just have it on top.
You did.
I'm gonna look at that too. But if you do like 2 boards, do a half ring on each side, then you can cut that on a bandsaw. Tilt your bandsaw at the angle that you need. And it's a lot more accurate that way.
We used to call them 45-degree bowls.
Yeah. That's about it. This one's been glued up. I haven't turned it yet.
Are you just using CA glue for that or wood glue?
Huh?
Are you using CA glue for that or wood glue?
I use Type Bond too,
That one.
but you could use CA glue. That would work. Yeah.
CA is brittle,
Right, I haven't done much with CA. I've done a lot
Yeah, a
more
bit
with
more
wood
brittle.
glue.
because CA, if you get a catch, it's liable to snap on you.
I built a
That's my opinion.
I built a segmented bowl years ago. A guy up at Mountain View was showing me how he did his. And so we did it his way. And he glued the segmented rings up with Type Bond, and then he layered them up with CA glue. I thought this is never going to hold together.
That's why.
But that's been about 6-8 years ago, and I still have that bowl in my house. I wouldn't sell it to anybody because I still think it's going to fall apart.
Don't drop it either.
If you drop it, it
Yeah,
might.
if you drop it, it'll shatter. And I've dropped bowls off my lathe that have Type Bond glue and that hold up. So,
I know type bond and stuff like before, it's great, it's strong.
it's good glue, yeah. Any other questions? Comments?
No, you done good.